How's it going? Welcome back. I recently poured and turned a duck call with pine cones in it that turned out pretty cool. So I figured I was going to pour another 4 call blanks with it and kind of show you along on how I do it. So I've got a thing here of pine cones that I pulled out of my front yard. What I use for my molds now is this silicone thing here that I've actually 3D printed an inverse to this and then poured my own silicone inside of it, pulled it out. So now I've got up to 4 calls at a time here that are the size of the blanks that I use and just reusable over and over. This time I'm switching up. I'm going to use Alumilite Amazing Deep Pour Epoxy. It says pours up to 2 inches thick, so I'm going to do that. Mixed with the pine cones. Then I've got an assortment of colors here of pigments. I'm going to end up using a little bit of black to tint the green darker because the green on this is pretty dark or light. And I think I'm going to mix in some metallic white. So what I've got here is Pearl X powdered pigments. If I can get it on the screen there. That, got the apple green, pearl white, and then this one here is something diamond black onyx that I use. I'm just going to use that to darken, again, the green up a little bit. So let's get started. All right, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pine cones and just kind of put them in here into the call blanks and pack them up as close to the top as possible. I'm going to pick the nicest ones because when they turn, those little pieces look kind of cool there. So I'm trying to get ones that aren't smashed up. And that's a nice big one. And just put all these in here. Whoop. So when I'm doing this, I want to get them pretty close to the top, just pretty much overflowing on the top, because when I do pour the epoxy, these will end up floating up, and we don't want that. So, and they're going to do it a little bit, but a lot of times I'll put a piece of wood over top of them and then put tape over it just to kind of hold them down so they don't float up when the epoxy is poured. All right, I think I'm going to switch up and just do 3. I ran out of pine cones, and unfortunately my yard is covered in snow now, so don't have ability to get more. So I can fill these up enough so they don't float. I'm gonna leave that 4th one out and just pour 3 calls this time. So all right, moving on to the next step. All right, to make sure that I pour the right amount of epoxy so I don't waste too much or come up short, I'm going to calculate volume. I know that these sections here are 1.75 by 2 by 3.25. So I'm going to say 1.75 times 2 times 3.25. That's 11.375 cubic inches each. I'm going to say times 3, 34.125. I'm going to call it 32. Oh, I'm sorry, 34. And then I'm going to convert 34 cubic inches to cc's, so I can use the measurement on here. All right, so I googled 34 cubic inches to cc. It looks like 557 cubic centimeters. So altogether for all 3 of those, I need 557. I'm just going to call it 550 because I've got volume in these pine cones here that's going to take up some of that. So 550. All right, next with this Alumilite Amazing Deep Pour Epoxy, the ratio is 2 parts A to 1 part B. So I need to split that 550 into thirds. And I'm not able to do that in my head. So 550 divided by 3, it's 183. Let's go 200. Got part A, I'm going to go 400 cc's. All right, 400 cubic centimeters of A. Now we're going to bring it from 400 up to 600 here with part B. There we go. All right, next step is to mix thoroughly for 5 minutes. So this is the least fun part of the whole thing, but here we go. All right, 5 minutes is up. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pour this into separate containers here for mixing in epoxy. I'm just going to do, again, pretty much one color of green with some black mixed in it to darken it, and then one separate of white that I'm going to pour in, white metallic. But since there's so much epoxy here, I'm going to have to pour the green into a couple containers because it won't all fit in one. I'm just going to eyeball it here a little bit. Wait. All right, so one other thing I did here is wrap the mold in duct tape, and I put a couple stirs across the top just to keep those pine cones from floating up. All right, onto the colors. So first one, I'm gonna get some pigment. Put it in. Mix. And scrape it off the edges there because it gets kind of clumped up on there. Pretty cool. So one thing that's good about this deep pour epoxy, it's got a long cure time, so it allows bubbles to come up. We're going to put it in a pressure pot, but that long cure time kind of allows more flexibility and freedom here to be able to mess around without worrying about it setting up on you. All right, so here's the part. I'm going to take just a, maybe not even that, maybe just a tiny amount of black here. Let's see what that does. A little bit goes a long way here, and sometimes I've done this where it just overdoes it completely. Yeah, that's perfect. I may not show it on the camera, but that's the difference in color, the darker one with the black and then the lighter one. Subtle difference, but again, it brings it down so it's not so bright. All right, lastly, I'm going to put some pearl white metallic into this one, and this is going to give it a little bit of kind of light in certain areas. I'm going to put a little bit more. I don't want it to be translucent. All right, time to pour. So I'm going to pour in green. I'll wait for it to fill up a little bit here. Pour slowly, just a fine string. So we're trying to eliminate bubbles as much as possible. And I'll pour till it's maybe, I don't know, a little over maybe half of an inch or so. And I'm going to add a little bit of white just to mix in a little bit of white. And poured it right over the edge. Whoops. Back to green. A little bit of white again. And then back to green. I am just making one heck of a mess here. That's all right. So I'm going to fill this just about all the way to the top of the mold. Because we're going to put this in a pressure pot, and any bubbles that are in there that eventually come out, the level of it's going to go down. And I want to make sure we get as large of a blank out of this as possible. I'll let that there for now. We'll move on to the next one. First green is done. Good time to add a little bit of white. Switch to our other green. And taking it nice and slow here, trying to get a thin strand pouring out of here so we're not introducing too many bubbles. A little bit of white here again. And top it off with the green. Good for there. All right, last call. Switch over to white. A little bit more white. I'm going to go ahead and top these others off real close to the edge. All right, that's what we are looking at. You can see how close we are to the top of those molds here. So Next step is I'm going to put this in a little bucket and I'm going to put it in my pressure pot at 60 psi for 24 or more hours. So I'm going to start that now. All right, we're going to take the caul mold that we just poured and very carefully, if I can do it without spilling, put it into this bucket. Make sure it's nice and tight. Connect up the air. And we're going to bring this up to 60 psi. I'm going to slowly bring it up here. Everything's closed. All right, there we are, 60 psi. So I've heard some controversy about leaving your air compressor plugged into this thing overnight. I do, just because of leakage of this thing. So what I do, I keep it open. I keep it at 60 psi, and as a safety measure, I'll set the regulator on the air compressor to 65. So if anything else, it's not really going to be putting out more than 65 psi unless both regulators end up breaking, which is pretty unlikely. So I'm going to leave this plugged in, open, connected to my air compressor at 60 psi here, and 65 psi on the compressor, and then we'll check back in tomorrow. All right, we are back 2 days later. I've pulled the caul blanks out of the pot, and we're going to go ahead and pull them out of the mold now. All right, so that's what they're looking like. I'm going to go ahead and just pull them out of the mold here. These do need to cure for 5 to 7 days, but I'm just going to pull them out now. They're hard to the touch. So I'm going to pull them out of here and get get them inside where it's a little bit warmer. All right, so that's what they look like coming out of the mold. And there we are, finished caul blanks. So I will put these in the bandsaw once they fully cure here in another 4 or 5 days, and I'll slice them off so they are perfectly square from this side, and that's what I will consider my finished blank. So I'll turn these out over the next few days, and they'll come out with some pretty cool looking pine cone and green duck cauls. Thanks for watching.